I want to move on and talk a little bit about, perhaps the top challenges, improvements, or, changes in regulation we can expect in 2025. And how might sponsor companies, especially who might be listening in today, can attempt to address the improvements that we see coming down the pike, or perhaps overcome any of the challenges that have existed in the past, maybe be traveling with us in 2025. So perhaps, Bambi, we can start with you on that.
So I want to start by saying that I think that a lot of what we see in cell and gene therapy is driven by what's coming from the developers. And I might be biased because I've been in the field a long time, and I've been in the field through a lot of the different stumbling blocks and difficulties that we've run into. But it seems to me that when we look at the history of cell and gene therapy, it's very much a field that's been driven by successes and failures and stumbles. And so when I really step back and think about that, there's 2,848 products in the pipeline for cell and gene therapy. And over 70% of them are preclinical, which means that aside from anybody who's working in the companies, most of us have no idea what a lot of the companies are working on. What that says to me is the things that come to the regulators, the things that come to the FDA, the regulators have to be really on their toes to figure out the science, the technology, all of the changes that are happening. And I think a lot of what we as kind of consumers of regulatory knowledge see is lessons learned from the developers and from some of the problems that develop as you take a product through the regulatory hoops. And I think that we see the same thing with guidance documents, and we've definitely seen that with holds and the types of things where if you're on the side where you're running a clinical trial, if you're a developer, sometimes you get queries or holds where they come out of nowhere and you really don't know what's going on. And then later the story will come out that this happened on a clinical trial of a related product or something like that. So I think that what we see in our field a little bit is that this is very much related to the fact that this is a living product, right? These are not small molecule products. These are products where you give cells or products to a patient and you're not sure exactly what will happen. And I think that's been part of the problem when we talk about potency and all kinds of different things. And I think that's a very interesting part of this, but I also think it makes it slightly difficult to predict. What I would say here is that what I hope we're going to see in the future is some improvements in manufacturing, some simplifying of processes, and I would expect that there would be a lot of guidance from the regulators around those topics.
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad you actually brought up manufacturing, which we will get to later in this discussion, as well as the guidance documents in the draft. So, but before we do, Kim, I'd love to get your perspective on top challenges, improvements, and what we can kind of hope to overcome in 2025, what improvements we can be hoping come down the pike too. What are your thoughts?
So I think the field is obviously still at an explosive state. Things that there really haven't been regulation changes that the field needs to adapt to, other the one that could have touched again, I have an FDA bias, a US bias, regulation bias. But the one that will affect is the regulation change about laboratory developed tests. So that was in May, FDA formalized that in vitro diagnostic tests are devices regulated by FDA, including when the manufacturer of the IVD is a laboratory. So labs that had been used for diagnostic tests, determining the patient selection for rare diseases, also tests to measure neutralizing antibody titers for AAV to determine that the patient most likely would not benefit from that product. So that type of aspect could affect cell and gene therapy products. The sponsors, again, are definitely encouraged to think about that early on and discuss that with FDA at your interact and pre-IND meetings. Is this test, is this device, is it, do I need to speak to CRH about the development of this as a companion diagnostic? So that's an important thing not to overlook. So if there needs to be parallel development with your lab test developer. There's multiple new guidances that have come out, but there's also the designation programs. Obviously there already is a plethora of designations for fast track and RMAT and breakthrough, so really no changes there. But the guidances came out for the platform designation and advanced manufacturing technology designation, and what are the qualifications for those programs? What are the potential benefits? So I could get into those more now, or do I could potentially talk about this later on in our hour.
Feel free to expand now if you'd like.
Okay, so the advanced manufacturing technology designation is for new technologies that are, most of them would be cutting edge, that are not going to have a separate development pathway. They're used in the manufacturing or perhaps in the testing characterization of products. And one can discuss these types of technologies in what's called a CAT meeting, the CBER Advanced Technologies team, and they can apply for advanced manufacturing technology designation. So refer to that guidance if you think you qualify. But this is a way to get additional interaction with FDA about that technology or the use of technology in your product. Perhaps there's no guarantee of an additional number of meetings or anything you get. But it will, if you're the developer of such a technology and you get that designation, you can, that can be used to, convince people that might be interested in using your technology, that they've had those interactions with FDA. FDA is aware of the technology and is open to its use in manufacturing or testing of cell and gene therapies. So I think that'll be a great program, and really because those types of technologies have been filed in master files, but they're not on a separate regulatory track for an approval. So it's I think it's going to be very important and helpful for cell and gene therapy. The platform technology designation. So both of these came out of federal legislation in the 2023 Omnibus Act that said FDA enact these programs and gave parameters into which that were the definitions of platform advanced therapy. The disappointment that has been seen across the field for the platform technology guidance comes from the statute that a platform technology needs to be used in one or more approved products to be designated a platform. So, with only 30 some unique companies that are manufacturing cell and gene therapies, approved cell and gene therapies, they're the only companies that can benefit from this, and their products can benefit from such a designation. But the field, obviously AAV and gene editing and other aspects of cell and gene therapy have long been talking about platforms and sharing of knowledge across a sponsor's multiple products or from sponsor to sponsor. Like, why can't information about a certain AAV capsid type be used globally, to support different sponsors' applications? So FDA has signaled that they are open to that and consideration, like a broader interpretation and application of platform technology, and has put on their CBER 2024, didn't complete it, but also included it again on the 2025 guidance agenda to release a guidance specifically about platform technologies for cell and gene therapy products. So I'll definitely be interested to see when that comes out, and
Sure.
Encourage stakeholders to read that and comment.